beginning of my childhood, I was a pretty reserved kid, didn't really branch out to many people. Um, and I did have one friend when I was about 6. He was one of my best friends, and I felt really close to him. I didn't find out until later that his brother had been exposed to pornography and that he had shared those things that he had seen with my friend. And because of that, my friend would share things with me. It eventually led to the point where me and him began sexual experimentation with each other when I was about 7 years old. And this went on basically our entire friendship. There were a couple occasions where my parents would walk in on me and my friend and would quickly send him home, and I'd be taken aside to be given a talk and be told, we don't want you seeing this friend anymore. Like what you guys are doing is wrong. And I was young enough that I didn't understand. We kind of started to grow apart. As I grew up, I started to question what happened between my friend and I because I didn't understand exactly what it meant. I didn't understand why I felt like I enjoyed what happened between me and him. The only information that I had regarding it were the talks that my parents would give me and the things that I had been told that what I had been doing was wrong, but I didn't understand why I had decided to do it at such a young age, or really why I had decided to do it at all. It was about when I was in 3rd grade that I ran into pornography. Actually, during one of my classes at school, there was a magazine that had pictures in it, and I noticed automatically that my eyes were brought to look at the men more than the women. And I just remember every day that we had reading time in that class, I'd search out that same magazine and look at the pictures over and over. That was my first experience with pornography. I remember one day when I was 15, my mom was getting on the computer and noticed in the search history what I had been looking at. That was the day that I later told my parents about my addictions. That was when I first started opening up. It was at this time in my life that I started to experience depression, and I started to really look at myself and start to not like myself anymore. And it was around this time that I really started to notice my attraction towards males and kind of started to come to a conclusion within myself, but not out to anybody else, that perhaps same gender attraction is something I struggled with. And I began to question why I had these feelings, why I had started these addictions. I started to question my belief in God. I started to question if God really loved me, if I was really worth the atonement that Christ paid for all of us, if it was even for me. When I was diagnosed with depression, I was put on antidepressant meds, which didn't really help me too much. And eventually it got to the point where I began to consider suicide. There was one instance where I had decided and planned to take my life shortly after my 16th birthday. And I just wanted to be alone. I just wanted to die. I didn't want to be alive anymore. I didn't want to feel like I was a burden to people. And my father soon found me in the park after he had been contacted and urged me to come home, which I finally reluctantly did, having not gone through with my plans. The following morning, my parents sent me to an inpatient treatment center. And while I was there, going through intense therapy and intense separation from normal life, I was basically brought to face the truth, even if I didn't want to. And it was at that time that I really came out to my parents about who I was, that I told them about my same gender attraction, that I told them about my feelings of self-hatred, and that I told them about my addictions and everything else, including the experiences I had had with a friend when I was younger. The treatment was hard for me. I spent about 230 days in the inpatient treatment center before being released the summer before my senior year. Going through the treatment center and meeting all those people who had all those struggles and seeing who they really were on the inside was a huge thing for me. To just be able to realize, there are people out there who, yes, make bad decisions, as I have, and that doesn't mean that they're worth any less to anyone, and especially to God. And that's when I started thinking about my own worth with what I had been through. That perhaps I'm not worthless to God. Perhaps God really does love me, and that he gave me these things so that I could grow and learn. Having same-gender attraction is something that in many ways I used to define myself by. In a lot of ways, I had basically fallen away from the church, would only go because my parents made me, and would leave as soon as I could. And it was at this point that I basically started living a gay lifestyle, that I had a guy who I acted out with sexually. I was going to live by my attractions because that was what I felt like was the only thing that I knew how to do. After that instance with the guy that I acted out with, I felt awful. I felt horrible and guilty, and I didn't understand why, because I thought that I was taking the path that was going to bring me happiness, because I thought that I was being true to myself, to my attractions, to my feelings, and yet when I acted out, I felt awful. It was at this time that I decided that I needed to try to turn back to the church, that I needed to really decide what I believed and what was right to me. I got myself back into the scriptures. I got myself back to praying to God. And while it was hard, I got my testimony back. For me, a big thing about why I had turned away from the church is that I was looking for fulfillment in my life. I was looking for my needs to be met physically, emotionally, that I realized that what I thought would have brought in me that fulfillment to act out with guys, to view pornography, and to do all these things that in my mind were being true to myself was actually bringing me less fulfillment than what I had been living before. It was because of the relationship I had had with God. It was because of the feelings that I got when I felt the Spirit, because of the comfort I felt when I got a blessing, because of the ability that I had to be able to talk with God about anything and everything, and not to fear judgment, and not to fear condemnation. After I got out of treatment, my parents, knowing about my same gender attraction, looked up resources for me and things for me that I could look to. And the Christmas after my 17th birthday, they got me the Voices of Hope book. And that was the first exposure to me that I had to really understand that there were other people out there who actually desired to live following the standards of the church while dealing with same-gender attraction. When I first got on the website, there were just a couple of videos that I was really drawn to. A couple of the videos that I watched, I actually got emotional while watching and felt the Spirit so strong. And just being able to watch the videos and read the essays about people who, like me, had experienced many trials in their life, who had dealt with same-gender attraction, and who may at times have felt like they weren't worth anything. And to be able to realize that there's a way to hold on to the gospel. There's a way to hold on to the standards placed in the church and still be happy. And in fact, be even more happy than I could be out living a gay lifestyle. After I had found the Voices of Hope project and had gotten onto North Star, that I started to notice an avalanche of changes in my life. Questions that I had been asking for years and years in my life and had never gotten an answer to, and prayers that I had pleaded with God for answers to, for understanding of why I was going through the things in my life that I was. Everything started to make sense to me at this time. All the answers to my questions and my prayers were being given to me. I was finally able to make friends with guys, again, with males, which was something that was huge for me because it was not something I was able to do for the longest time in my life. And as an even added bonus, these were males who understood me, who didn't judge me, and who were able to love me for me, something that I hadn't really experienced from other people. It was about this time that I really started to think of my attractions, to even think of my addictions, as not curses, as not things that brought me down and made me a bad person, but rather as tender mercies from the Lord, blessings that the Lord had given me, which gave me the ability to drop my judgmental stance that I used to take towards other people, to be open to love other people in ways that I had never even thought possible, and to be able to allow other people to love me in ways that I had never thought possible. It was around this time that I really started to turn to God, and I really began to understand my relationship with Him and what it meant to me, and that my relationship with God was more important to me than anything a sexual or romantic relationship with a man could bring me. And this was a big turning point for me, to be able to finally realize that I could get my needs met in healthy ways, in platonic relationships, with other males and through God. And that I didn't have to turn from God, I didn't have to turn from the church.